All right, so today we're going deep on Elon Musk. You know the guy seems to be everywhere these days, launching rockets, tweeting memes, and he always seems to be in the headlines for one reason or another. We're going to try to get to the man behind all the hype. Using this biography by Ashlee Vance as our guide, we'll be looking at everything from his childhood in South Africa to the founding of SpaceX and Tesla and everything in between.
What's interesting to me is that we tend to just focus on Musk's, current larger-than-life persona. But his journey, his evolution, that really holds the key to understanding what drives him.
Yeah, and our sources, including this biography, offer a pretty unique range of perspectives. We're talking personal anecdotes from friends and family, insights from industry experts who've worked alongside him, and even a look into some legal battles he's faced along the way.
For me, it's about understanding how one person has come to have such a huge influence on industries that seem, on the surface at least, worlds apart. Space exploration, electric vehicles, renewable energy.
So let's start at the beginning, with Musk's childhood. And trust me, it's a far cry from the billionaire launching rockets into space. He was born in South Africa, and his early years were marked by some pretty tough challenges.
It was anything but easy. Relentless bullying, a really complex family dynamic, all that really forged his resilience and drive that we see today.
He's actually described his childhood as nonstop horrible. He was bullied so badly that he was hospitalized at one point, and then his parents divorced when he was young, leaving him feeling pretty isolated, even within his own family.
But even with all that, you can see glimpses of what he'd become later on.
Right, even as a kid, this insatiable curiosity, and he was always diving into complex projects. I mean, at just 12 years old, he programmed and sold his first video game called Blastar. I mean, it's like those entrepreneurial instincts were there from the beginning.
That early fascination with computers really foreshadowed a lot of his later pursuits. You can see his self-sufficiency, that need to create things, all present at such a young age.
Yeah, and we can't overlook his grandfather, Joshua Haldeman. He was a Canadian chiropractor.
Oh yeah, he was quite a character. Flew his family all over North America in his own plane. And then, you're not going to believe this, he packed up the whole family and moved them to South Africa, just looking for a new adventure.
Wow, just up and moved the whole family to a new continent. That kind of daring seems to run in the family.
Mhm.
And then there's his mother, May. She was not your typical stay-at-home mom.
No, not at all. May was a successful model. She was even a finalist in the Miss South Africa competition. She had this glamorous side, but she was also really practical. And she actually kept modeling into her later years, magazine covers, even in a Beyoncé music video.
So you have this kid who's brilliant, bullied, fascinated by technology, with an adventurous grandfather and a glamorous, independent mother. It's like the perfect recipe for someone like Elon Musk, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think those early influences definitely played a big part in shaping his willingness to take risks, his fascination with tech, and that unwavering self-belief that he's become known for.
And that risk-taking really comes into play when you look at how he became an entrepreneur, starting with his move to Canada and then on to the US.
That was such a huge moment for him, a real leap of faith, driven by his ambition and his desire to kind of break free from South Africa.
Yeah, so he landed in Canada first, stayed with relatives, before making his way to the US. And even back then, his hustle was undeniable. He was a bank intern, he started a house painting business. He even had some, well, let's call them unconventional business ideas. You remember that time he almost bought a bank?
Oh yeah, that's classic Elon. Always thinking big, even if it didn't work out in the end.
Exactly. And then it was off to the University of Pennsylvania, where he got degrees in both economics and physics. But he wasn't just going through the motions in college, he was writing these really ambitious papers
Mhm.
on things like electronic document scanning, which sounds a lot like the early groundwork for something like Google Books, don't you think?
It's amazing how prescient some of his ideas were. He could really see the potential to change entire industries.
Yeah, and let's not forget his work with ultracapacitors, which could be a real breakthrough in energy storage. Ultracapacitors are energy storage devices that can charge and discharge much faster than normal batteries. And Musk saw the potential for these things everywhere, from electric cars to power grids.
He was definitely ahead of his time, willing to challenge the status quo. You can really see the curiosity and ambition that would define his career.
So all this hustling and studying led to his first big ventures, Zip2 and PayPal. You could say these companies were like his entrepreneurial boot camp.
Zip2 was an online city guide that gave businesses a platform to reach new customers. It was really his first experience with a startup. building something from the ground up.
And then came PayPal, which revolutionized how we pay for things online. Selling it to eBay for $1.5 billion really put him on the map. Not to mention it gave him the financial resources to do even bigger things.
I think that PayPal experience was crucial, not just for the money, but the lessons in leadership, technology development, and navigating the often complicated world of business.
It wasn't always easy, though. There are all those stories about him clashing with engineers, about rewriting code,
Hmm.
and his near-death experience with malaria.
Yeah, he's a very driven person, sometimes maybe a bit too abrasive, but he pushes himself and everyone around him to the limit.
So by his early 30s, Musk had sold 2 successful companies. He had a ton of money and had gotten a lot of valuable experience. But here's where it gets interesting. He decides to take all that money and put it into 2 super risky ventures, SpaceX and Tesla.
It was an incredibly bold move. He was betting on industries that most people thought were impossible to break into. I mean, it was a huge gamble. SpaceX, with this goal of revolutionizing space travel, and Tesla trying to, speed up the adoption of electric vehicles. Those are both massive undertakings.
Basically saying, forget the private island, I'm going to Mars. I mean, most people would have just retired and enjoyed all that money. But not Elon. He chose to go after 2 of the most complex and expensive industries imaginable.
And it's important to remember what was happening at the time. Like, the dot-com bubble had just burst. There was this, feeling of disillusionment with all this tech stuff. But Musk seemed to just, double down on his belief in innovation, in engineering, to solve all these big problems.
He was basically like, yeah, flying cars are cool, but let's figure out how to get to Mars first. And all that belief was really tested in the early days of SpaceX.
Oh, man, those first few years were brutal. So many setbacks. They almost went bankrupt several times. I mean, multiple launches failed, just draining their resources and just, pushing everyone to their limits.
That must have been so stressful. You've poured your heart and soul, not to mention millions of dollars,
Yeah.
into this dream. And your rockets are exploding, and everyone's looking at you for answers. I mean, Musk's leadership during this time was, well, intense, to say the least.
Oh, yeah. He was really demanding, relentless. I mean, he has a reputation for pushing people really hard.
Yeah.
Some people said it was like a trial by fire. Only the strongest could survive.
Yeah. Working weekends, sleeping under desks, getting, really tough feedback. Doesn't sound like a great time.
But it seems like that was part of how they achieved the impossible.
Right.
It's funny. On the one hand, he's super demanding and abrasive, but he's also incredibly inspiring. People were loyal to him and accomplished these amazing things.
Didn't he say something like, I don't create artificial adversity, life is hard enough already? It was all about solving problems, no matter what.
Absolutely. But even with all that going on, there were some key people that helped keep SpaceX afloat.
Well, yeah, like Wynne Shotwell. She joined early on and became president and COO.
She was vital in those early years, getting contracts, building relationships with NASA. She brought stability to what was often a really chaotic situation.
She's like the steady hand at SpaceX, the yin to Musk's yang. And
Yeah.
together, they managed to create a private company that can launch rockets into space, competing with these huge aerospace giants. Do you remember those early launches to the Kwajalein Atoll?
Oh, yeah, those were symbolic. I mean, a turning point for the whole space industry. This private company, driven by this entrepreneurial spirit, doing what only governments used to be able to do.
And then they won contracts with NASA to transport cargo and eventually astronauts to the ISS.
I mean, that was huge.
Yeah.
Talk about legitimacy. Plus, the resources and credibility to do even more,
Yeah.
like reusable rockets or sending people to Mars.
So while all this is happening with SpaceX, Tesla was having its own set of problems. I mean, their first car, the Roadster, was basically an electric sports car built on a Lotus Elise chassis. The goal was to prove that electric cars could be high performance, desirable, not just eco-friendly.
Right. It was like making a statement, challenging everyone's idea of what an electric car could be. Fast acceleration, sleek design. It definitely turned heads.
But it was super expensive. And they had all these production delays. Remember all those stories about faulty transmissions? And Musk personally flying to Europe to deliver manufacturing tools.
Yeah, starting a car company from scratch is tough, especially one that's pushing the boundaries of tech and design.
But even with all those issues, Tesla delivered the Roadster, and, maybe more importantly, they got everyone excited about electric cars. It was a crucial first step, paving the way for the Model S.
The Model S was a game changer for Tesla, a completely electric sedan designed from the ground up, great range, performance, and all those cool new features like that giant touchscreen, which you see in so many cars now.
He was obsessed with that touchscreen. He saw that as the future of car interfaces.
Absolutely. And he insisted on an all-aluminum body. A lot of people thought that was crazy,
Mm.
but it made the car lighter, which improved performance.
You know, he's known for being a real perfectionist, even down to the smallest details, like the design of the sun visors. I mean, that was that story about him demanding they change the shape because he didn't like how they looked.
It could be frustrating for the people working with him, but that drive for excellence has played a huge part in their success.
Yeah, I mean, the Model S got amazing reviews, won tons of awards, and really cemented Tesla's position as a leader in the EV market.
And all of this was happening while he's going through a very public divorce, raising 5 kids,
Mm-hmm.
and constantly being scrutinized by investors and the media.
That was a pretty wild time.
Yeah, around 2008, things were really tough for him. Both Tesla and SpaceX were close to collapsing. It's amazing he was able to pull through.
He said it felt like he was going through hell, but it also, gave him a deeper sense of purpose and a better understanding of himself and his companies.
Yeah, it seems like all that adversity just made him stronger.
Mm.
Like he knew these weren't just businesses, they were missions, important to the future of humanity.
Okay, so we've got this guy launching rockets, building electric cars, dealing with all this personal drama, and somehow coming out on top. But it doesn't end there. Musk has his hands in so many other things.
Yeah, his ambition is incredible. He's involved with Solar City, the solar energy company his cousin started, and he's proposed these crazy ideas like the Hyperloop, a high-speed transportation system that could completely change how we travel.
And then there's colonizing Mars.
You know that fascination with space travel?
Mm-hmm.
Which clearly goes back to his childhood. He's really driven his investment in SpaceX and his belief that we need to become a multi-planetary species.
He's like playing real-life civilization, trying to advance humanity on all these different fronts.
Exactly. But there's another side to this story, a darker side that we need to talk about. The Musk paradox.
Yeah.
You know, all this demanding leadership, his pursuit of these huge goals, and his sometimes controversial public image. It's raised a lot of questions about what it all costs, not just in dollars, but in, the human cost of all of this.
I mean, he's been called a tyrant, a
Yeah.
workaholic, a control freak. And there's definitely truth to the fact that his intense work ethic and his, demanding nature have had an impact on the people around him, including his family and personal relationships.
Yeah, he's been married several times, and he's talked about how difficult it is to balance work and family. He's admitted that his dedication to his companies has sometimes hurt his relationships.
I remember that story about him, calculating how many hours a week a girlfriend would need. Like there was some kind of business negotiation.
Right. It's almost funny, but also kind of sad.
Yeah.
It shows how much his work consumes him. It affects every part of his life.
And then there's that lawsuit brought against him by a physicist, Peter O'Reilly,
All right.
who claimed that Musk stole his idea for Zip2.
Yeah, that lawsuit was eventually dismissed. But it did bring up some inconsistencies in Musk's story, especially about his time at Stanford.
Mm-hmm.
It also showed how much he cares about his image.
I find it interesting that Musk didn't go after that $125,000 payment that O'Reilly was ordered to pay. Maybe he just thought it wasn't worth the hassle. Or maybe it's like he recognizes how messy the whole thing was.
Yeah, it's important to remember that even the most successful people aren't perfect, and there are always multiple sides to every story.
So where does that leave us? I mean, we've explored the highs and lows of Elon Musk, the brilliant innovator, the driven entrepreneur, the demanding leader, this really complex person.
Yeah, it's hard to put him in a box. He's inspiring and frustrating at the same time, but he's definitely pushed the boundaries of technology,
Yeah.
made us think differently about things, and forced us to ask tough questions about the future.
So is he a visionary who will save us all? Or is he a ruthless capitalist just looking to make a buck? Or maybe something in between?
That's the question we want you to think about. Musk has definitely had an impact on the world, but it's too early to say what his legacy will be.
As his innovations continue to change the world, it's important to really understand him.
To look beyond the headlines and the memes, to really understand the complexities of the man and what his ambitions mean for all of us.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you came away with a better understanding of Elon Musk and how he's shaping our world.